November 1st, 2006, Greenwich Village, New York. A talented actress and filmmaker named Adrienne Shelly was found hanging in her studio bathroom. The police ruled it suicide. Case closed. But wait, something wasn't right. Her husband, Andy, refused to believe it. "There's no way she would have left our 3-year-old daughter," he insisted. Her career was booming. Her film Waitress was about to premiere at Sundance. She had everything to live for. But here's the twist that will shock you. What looked like a simple suicide was actually a calculated murder, staged by someone she had never even met. A construction worker with a dark secret, a robbery gone wrong, and a cover-up so convincing, it almost worked. But there was one tiny detail the killer overlooked. A single footprint that would unravel his perfect crime and expose the truth behind one of New York's most shocking murders. Today, I'm taking you inside a case that has everything: deception, betrayal, and a husband's relentless fight for justice. Buckle up, because this story will take you on a roller coaster of emotions. Stay till the end, because the final revelation will leave you speechless. Adrienne Shelly wasn't just any actress. She was a force of nature in the independent film world. Born Adrienne Levine in Queens, she had clawed her way up from summer stock theater to starring in critically acclaimed films. She had worked with legendary director Hal Hartley, appeared on Law & Order, and had over 24 off-Broadway plays under her belt. But what nobody knew was that her greatest work, the film that would make her a household name, was sitting in post-production, waiting to be discovered. Waitress would become a cultural phenomenon, but Adrienne would never see its success. Andy Astroy, CEO of a Manhattan marketing firm, had found his soulmate in Adrienne. They lived in a beautiful Greenwich Village apartment with their daughter Sophie, who was the light of Adrienne's life. Friends described them as the perfect couple, supportive, loving, and deeply committed to each other. What made this tragedy even more devastating was that Adrienne had struggled with fertility. 4 years before finally having Sophie, she had waited so long to become a mother that the idea of her abandoning her child was not just unlikely, it was impossible. The Abingdon Square apartment wasn't just an office, it was Adrienne's sanctuary. This was where she wrote scripts, edited films, and planned her future projects. The walls were covered with movie posters, awards, and photos of her family. It was a place of creativity and hope. On November 1st, 2006, this sanctuary would become a crime scene, and the bathroom where Adrienne got ready for important meetings would become the site of a carefully orchestrated murder. That fateful Wednesday, morning started like any other. Andy drove Adrienne to her studio at 9:30 a.m., kissed her goodbye, and headed to his office. Adrienne had meetings planned, editing to finish, and dreams to fulfill. The doorman later told police that everything seemed normal when she arrived. What nobody realized was that just one floor below, a 19-year-old construction worker named Diego Pillco was about to make a decision that would destroy multiple lives forever. As the day wore on, Andy tried calling Adrienne multiple times, but she didn't answer. This was unusual. She always picked up his calls. By evening, worry turned to panic. Andy rushed to the studio, and when he arrived, he found something that chilled him to the bone. The front door was unlocked. Adrienne, who was always secure to conscience, especially in New York City, would never leave her door unlocked. This was the first sign that something was terribly wrong. When Andy entered the apartment with the building's doorman, they made a discovery that would haunt them forever. In the bathroom, hanging from a shower rod with a bedsheet around her neck, was Adrienne Vey. The scene looked like suicide, but Andy's heart told him otherwise. What investigators initially missed was that Adrienne was found wearing only socks. Her shoes were nowhere to be found, but there was a sneaker print in the bathtub that didn't belong to her. The NYPD's initial response was routine, apparent suicide, case closed. But Detective Squad 6 wasn't satisfied. They noticed inconsistencies. Money missing from Adrienne, wallet, that mysterious footprint, and Andy's absolute certainty that his wife would never abandon their daughter. If not for one detective's decision to photograph that footprint and compare it to every person who had entered the apartment, Diego Pillco would have gotten away with the perfect murder as detectives canvassed 15 Abingdon Square. They discovered that construction work was happening throughout the building. Workers came and went daily, many of them undocumented immigrants paid in cash. The building's management had little oversight of who was actually working there. What they found was a man named Diego Pillco, who had been working on renovations just one floor below Adrienne's studio. His shoes were covered in gypsum dust, the same dust found in that mysterious footprint. On November 6th, 5 days after the murder, Diego Pillco was brought in for questioning. He was a small, quiet man who had been in the United States for only 4 months. At first, he denied everything. But when confronted with the footprint evidence, his story began to crumble. His first confession was a lie designed to minimize his crime. He claimed Adrienne had complained about construction noise, and in his panic about being deported, he accidentally killed her during an argument. For over a year, Pillco maintained his story about a noise complaint gone wrong, but on February 14, 2008, during his guilty plea, the real truth finally emerged. There was no noise complaint. There was no accidental death. Diego Pillco had deliberately entered Adrienne's apartment to rob her. When she caught him stealing money from her purse and threatened to call the police, he made a calculated decision. To kill her to avoid arrest and deportation? The courtroom fell silent as Pillco described exactly what happened. When Adrienne saw him stealing and reached for her phone to call 911, he grabbed her and covered her mouth. As she screamed and struggled, he threw her to the floor. Then, seeing a bedsheet nearby, he made the cold-blooded decision to strangle her. The medical examiner's report revealed the most chilling detail of all. Adrienne was still alive when he hanged her from the shower rod. Her final moments were spent in terror, knowing she was about to die. After strangling Adrienne, Pillco didn't just flee the scene. He carefully staged her death to look like suicide. He positioned her body, arranged the bedsheet, and even cleaned up evidence of the struggle. His plan was methodical and calculated, but in his panic, he made one crucial mistake. He left that footprint in the bathtub, a piece of evidence that would eventually lead to his downfall and bring justice for Adrienne. When the case went to court, the prosecution faced a dilemma. Pillco's defense team argued that this was an accidental death during a robbery gone wrong, not premeditated murder. But the evidence told a different story. The fact that Pillco had taken the time to stage the suicide proved that he knew exactly what he was doing. This wasn't panic, it was cold, calculated murder followed by an elaborate cover dash-up dot at the sentencing hearing. Andy Astroy delivered a victim impact statement that brought the courtroom to tears. He spoke of his wife's kindness, her talent, and her devotion to their daughter. But then his tone changed, and he looked directly at Pillco. "I want you to suffer like she suffered," he said, "to live a life of fear, the same fear she felt when she realized she was about to die." These words would haunt Pillco for the rest of his life. On March 6, 2008, Diego Pillco was sentenced to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Judge Carol Berkman made it clear that this was not just about punishment, it was about justice for a woman whose life was cut short by senseless violence. After serving his sentence, Pillco would face deportation back to Ecuador, meaning he would lose everything he had come to America to build. His moment of greed had cost him his entire future. Waitress premiered at the 2007 Sundance Film Festival, just months after Adrienne's death. The film was a massive success, earning over $19 million at the box office and receiving critical acclaim worldwide. Audiences fell in love with the story Adrienne had created, never knowing the tragic circumstances of her death. The film's success proved that Adrienne's talent was undeniable, and her murder had robbed the world of what could have been a brilliant career spanning decades. Andy Astroy channeled his grief into something positive by establishing the Adrienne Shelly Foundation. The foundation provides grants, scholarships, and support to emerging filmmakers, ensuring that Adrienne's passion for independent cinema continues to inspire new generations of artists. One of the foundation's early grant recipients, Cynthia Wade, went on to win an Academy Award for her documentary Freeheld. Even in death, Adrienne was still helping to create award-winning films. So what have we learned from this tragic case that shook New York to its core and changed the lives of everyone involved forever? This case is a masterclass in how the smallest details can crack the biggest lies. One footprint, just one. That's all it took to bring down an entire murder cover-up. Diego Pillco thought he had committed the perfect crime, but forensic science and determined detective work proved that there's no such thing as a perfect murder. The truth always finds a way to surface. But let's talk about the real hero of this story, Andy Astroy. When everyone else was ready to close the case as suicide, he refused to give up. He knew his wife better than anyone, and his love for her gave him the strength to fight for justice. This shows us that sometimes the people closest to victims are the most important voices in solving crimes. Trust your instincts. Question everything. Don't let anyone tell you what you know in your heart isn't true. Now, here's what really gets me about this case: the randomness of it all. Adrienne Shelly wasn't targeted. She wasn't stalked. She was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time when a desperate man made a terrible decision. It could have been anyone. It could have been you or me. That's what makes this case so terrifying and so heartbreaking. Diego Pillco came to America with dreams. Just like millions of other immigrants, he wanted to work hard, send money home to his family, and build a better life. But in one moment of panic and greed, he threw it all away. He destroyed not just his own future, but ended the life of a talented woman who had so much more to give to the world. And let's not forget the real victims here. Sophie Astroy, who lost her mother when she was just 3 years old, and Andy, who lost his soulmate and best friend. Every day they have to live with the knowledge that Adrienne's life was cut short by a senseless act of violence. No amount of justice can bring her back or heal that pain. But here's the twist that gives me hope. Adrienne's legacy lives on. Waitress became a beloved film that touched millions of hearts. The Adrienne Shelly Foundation has helped countless filmmakers achieve their dreams. Even the Women's Film Critics Circle gives an annual award in her name to films that oppose violence against women. She's still making a difference, even after death. This case also raises serious questions about building security and worker oversight. How did Diego Pillco gain access to Adrienne's apartment? Should there have been better screening of construction workers? These are questions that building managers and property owners need to ask themselves to prevent future tragedies. The legal system worked in this case, but it wasn't perfect. Pillco was initially charged with second-degree murder, but his plea deal reduced it to manslaughter. Some people might say that's not enough for such a brutal crime. What do you think was 25 years without parole sufficient justice for taking a life so violently? One thing that still haunts me is thinking about Adrienne's final moments. She was working on her masterpiece, probably excited about her future, when suddenly she was confronted by an intruder. The terror she must have felt, knowing she was about to die and would never see her daughter again. It's something that stays with you long after the case is solved. But perhaps the most important lesson from this case is about the power of persistence. The investigation could have ended with a suicide ruling. The case could have gone cold. But because people refused to give up Andy Astroy, the prosecutor's justice was served, it reminds us that every victim deserves someone who will fight for them. This case had everything that makes true crime so compelling: mystery, deception, forensic science, and ultimately, justice. But it also had something else. A reminder that behind every sensational headline is a real person with real dreams, and real people who loved them. Adrienne Shelly was more than just a murder victim. She was a daughter, a wife, a mother, an artist, and a dreamer. She was someone who brought joy and creativity into the world. And while her life was cut short, her impact continues to be felt by everyone who watches her films or benefits from her foundation. So what's your take on this case? Do you think Diego Pillco deserved a harsher sentence? Should the construction company have been held liable? And what about building security? How can we better protect people in their workplaces? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this case moved you like it moved me, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into true crime cases that will keep you thinking long after the video ends. And remember, every victim has a story worth telling, and every story deserves to be heard. Until next time, stay safe out there, trust your instincts, and never stop fighting for justice. This is your host, reminding you that sometimes the most important cases are the ones that teach us about the fragility of life and the power of love to overcome even the darkest tragedies. Rest in peace, Adrienne Shelly. Your light continues to shine.